always cherished the camaraderie of group hikes. There's something about sharing the beauty of nature, the quiet evenings by the campfire, and the thrill of the unknown that deepens friendships. On this particular trip, our group consisted of 2 guys, 2 girls, and myself, all eager for the 3-day trek ahead. The first day went smoothly. We laughed, sang songs, and set up our campsite by nightfall. Under a canopy of stars, the campfire roared to life, casting dancing shadows around our little clearing. Drifting to sleep, I felt an overwhelming sense of peace. The next morning, as we prepared breakfast, one of the girls found an abandoned digital camera just a few feet from our campsite. Curious, we powered it on and discovered it was in working condition. As we scrolled through the stored photos, our amusement turned to confusion and then horror. The images depicted us sleeping soundly in our tents, taken from various angles with an unsettling focus on the zipped entrances. The last photo was a close-up of her face, taken from just outside her tent. The realization that someone had been watching us, close and unnoticed, sent chills down our spines. "We need to leave," someone said, breaking the tense silence. Before we could react, another discovery was made. The date on the pictures was from tonight, taken just a few hours ago. A collective dread settled upon the group. The photographer could still be nearby, watching us. We quickly packed up, abandoning breakfast, and decided to leave the trail. The once inviting forest now felt like a labyrinth of shadows and potential threats. As we returned, the sense of being watched grew stronger. Whispers spread within the group about the best course of action. We considered splitting up, but the idea of isolation was more terrifying. Our initial panic was replaced by growing paranoia. Every rustling leaf and distant bird call made us jump. By evening, exhausted but too scared to set up camp, we pressed on with flashlights cutting through the growing darkness. That's when we found the next clue, another camera, almost identical to the first, placed conspicuously in the middle of the path. With a sinking feeling, we checked its photos, eerily similar to the first, with one chilling addition: more recent pictures of our group from earlier that day. There we were, examining the first camera, with photos taken from behind trees as we discussed our plan of action. The photographer had been close, and we hadn't noticed. Terrified, we decided to set up a decoy. Pitching a tent further down the trail, we hid, hoping to catch the stalker off guard. Hours passed, and just as we were about to give up hope, a figure approached. We sprang from our hiding places, flashlights aimed at him. Blinded and disoriented, he stumbled back, disappearing into the woods with surprising speed. We gathered evidence from his camp and reported everything to the authorities. Despite police involvement, the man was never caught. It was concluded that he was a lone individual obsessed with stalking hiking groups, taking photographs as twisted trophies. The day they started with promise. Packed and prepared, I embarked on a solo night hike, seeking solitude for much-needed reflection. The initial part of the hike was serene, with birds providing a natural soundtrack and the evening sun casting a warm golden hue over the woods. However, as dusk approached, the forest transformed. Once familiar trails seemed to twist and contort, leading me in circles. The towering trees, once majestic, now felt oppressive. My reliable sense of direction betrayed me. Every path seemed to lead deeper into the dense woods. To make matters worse, I noticed signs of recent human activity: freshly dug patches of earth, abandoned tools, and boot prints going in all directions. A growing unease settled in as I realized I wasn't alone. The distant murmur of conversation confirmed my suspicions. Trying to avoid making noise, I stepped lightly, but the forest floor was a minefield of dry leaves and twigs. Every crunch felt deafening, potentially alerting others to my presence. As the night deepened, my flashlight began to dim, adding to my rising panic. Desperate, I used a flare from my emergency kit, hoping its glow would guide me out or attract friendly assistance. I hesitated, considering the ramifications. Lighting the flare could lead potential rescuers to me, but it could also signal my location to someone I might not want to meet. In my desperation, I ignited the flare. Its glow pierced the darkness, revealing signs of recent human activity tarps thrown haphazardly over supplies and more dug-up patches as if someone had been searching for something. Regret washed over me. I was now unmistakably illuminated, an easy target for anyone or anything out there. In the distance, shuffling noises grew louder, and the murmur of voices became more pronounced. Hiding seemed the best option. In a dense thicket, I crouched down, the flare's dying light my only shield. The men were talking, their conversation mixed with the metallic clang of tools. They were searching for something, and I had unwittingly entered their territory. As the flare's light faded, I knew I had to move. Staying put wasn't an option. Gathering my courage, I picked a direction and started walking, hoping to put distance between myself and the murmured voices. The forest seemed endless, and just as despair set in, I noticed a change. Trees started to thin out, revealing an opening ahead. As I got closer, the soft murmur of a radio and distant conversation reached my ears. Accompanied by the clang of metal on metal, it led me to a camp. However, the scene wasn't what I had hoped for. It was a small, makeshift camp, not set up by regular hikers, but by excavators. Men covered in dirt and sweat were working on a pit. Hidden behind a tree, I watched. It was evident they were digging for something illegal. The flare was dying out, and I feared its dimming light might reveal my position. Quietly, I inched backward, praying they hadn't noticed me. My foot caught on a root, sending me tumbling, and the flare rolled out into the open. Heads turned toward the red glow, faces momentarily illuminated. My cover was blown. "Who's there? Show yourself." One of them yelled. Swallowing hard, I stepped out, hands raised in surrender. "I'm just a hiker," I stammered. "I got lost." They exchanged glances, a silent conversation playing out. The camp's illegality meant they wouldn't take kindly to a witness. To my surprise, an older man with a grizzled beard stepped forward. "You picked a bad time to get lost," he muttered, an almost sympathetic look in his eyes. "This isn't a place for hikers." I pleaded to go home, and after a brief exchange, they handed me a water bottle and a flashlight. The bearded man pointed towards a narrow path. "Head that way, and you'll hit the main trail in about half an hour." Confused, I asked why they were helping. The man's eyes held a far-off look. "Everyone deserves a second chance. Now go and don't come back, and forget you saw anything here." I didn't need to tell twice. Clutching the flashlight, I made my way towards the path he had pointed out. True to his word, I found myself on the familiar main trail before long. The dawn's first light broke, and with it, the forest's sinister grip on me began to wane. Reaching my car, the weight of the night's events bore down on me. The journey from an idyllic hike to a terrifying ordeal had been a stark reminder of how quickly things could change. One thing was certain: I'd be sticking to well-trodden paths from now on. It was supposed to be a straightforward day hike, a circular route that would return us to our cars by evening. The trail was known for its picturesque views and calm resting spots. Our group, composed of myself, Anna, Brian, and Clara, set off early in the morning. The sunrise painted the sky in vibrant hues of orange and pink, lifting our moods. The first part of the hike was ordinary. We paused, occasionally to take in the beauty, capture some photographs, and engage in light banter. As the day progressed, the once frequent and bold trail markers grew scarce and faded. By late afternoon, the unsettling truth hit us: we were lost. Our usually trusty GPS devices showed scrambled signals, and the map seemed irrelevant, bearing no similarity to the terrain. Quiet panic began to seep in. We decided our best bet was to backtrack, hoping to find a familiar part of the trail. As shadows grew longer, our steps became more frantic. It was during this haste that Clara fell hard, twisting her ankle. Our predicament intensified. Our supplies amounted to some water, a few energy bars, and a basic first aid kit huddled together. Trying to offer Clara some comfort and warmth, we divided our scant supplies, aware they had to last us the night and potentially more. The chilling night was punctuated by the sounds of wildlife, every noise amplified, adding to our unease. By dawn, our primary concern was gnawing hunger. Brian made a discovery, hoping to find berries or water. He came across a concealed spot between two boulders. To our astonishment, it held a stash of survival supplies, packaged dried foods, energy bars, and sealed water pouches. They looked as though they had been there for a while, perhaps left by a previous hiker. Overwhelmed with relief, we ate from the packaged supplies. Each bite tasted like a luxury given our hunger. But a question persisted in the back of my mind. Why was this here? Who had left it, and why didn't they return for it? As night fell again, our unease grew. Soft, indistinct chanting echoed around us, and odd little objects appeared near our makeshift camp dolls, made from twigs and feathers, intertwined with what looked disturbingly like human hair. Most alarming were the footprints, large, strange imprints circling our spot and leading directly to the stash of food. Fear was palpable. We felt watched. The night passed without incident, but in the morning, we opted to leave the stash behind and move on. No matter how far we traveled, signs of our unseen observer followed footprints, eerie dolls, and an ever-present sense of being watched. Despite our discovery, the return of strength from the food we consumed was overpowered by heightened anxiety. The thought of an unseen watcher never left our minds, and with each passing hour, the sensations grew stronger. The next night, as we huddled close, whispering our plans for the next day, the first stone landed near our campfire. Then another and another. We shot up, scanning the surrounding darkness for any sign of movement. The soft chanting, ever present since our discovery of the food stash, now reached a crescendo. It seemed to be coming from all around us. Anna, trying to remain rational, suggested it might be locals or even other hikers playing a cruel prank. "People do strange things when they're bored," she whispered. But her theory was thrown into doubt when we saw the fresh set of those bizarre footprints the next morning. We had to leave, injured or not. Clara, her ankle now swollen but numbed with painkillers we found in the stash, was supported by Brian and me. Anna took the lead, determinedly pushing forward. We kept our destination in sight, a distant hill that seemed familiar from our initial hike. If we could just reach it, we believed we could find our way back to the car. As we walked, the terrain became challenging, with rocks and roots conspiring against our weary feet. More disturbingly, those twig and feather dolls appeared along our path, each one looking more grotesque than the last. Midday brought a startling discovery. Claire, stopping to adjust the makeshift bandage on her ankle, found another stash almost identical to the first. More packaged food, water, and a journal. Its pages were worn and filled with scribbles, sketches, and ramblings. The entry spoke of beings that protected sacred grounds and did not take kindly to intruders. The last entry was chilling. They watch, they follow. I leave this in the hope someone finds it before making the same mistakes I did. Realizing we might be on sacred or forbidden grounds, we decided to offer a token of peace. Taking out some of the food, we laid it in a small clearing, hoping our mysterious observers would see it as a peace offering. The sun was setting when we finally recognized a familiar trail. Our relief was palpable, but our journey wasn't over. The chanting began anew, louder and more insistent. Shadows seemed to move just beyond our line of sight, always lurking but never fully revealing themselves. When the first lights of our parked cars shimmered in the distance, we broke into a run. Once inside, we locked the doors, hearts pounding as we sped away. In the rearview mirror, the silhouettes of tall, lanky figures stood at the trail's entrance, watching us leave.